joining us today is Commissioner Deyi. Commissioner, welcome and thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Mikadeko. This is great.
So we're just going to jump right into it. Please just explain to us what LGBTI rights are and how why the CGE is interested in it.
Well, I mean, when we speak about LGBTI rights, the misconception is that LGBTI rights are something extra or special. But when we talk about LGBTI rights, particularly in the context of the CGE's mandate, it's about the investigating how and why the LGBTI community and people in the LGBTI community are not able to access all the rights as contained in the Constitution. So that includes the right to education, the right to shelter, the right to reproductive safety and bodily autonomy, the right to human dignity, the right to life. How is our society, or how our laws, protecting a vulnerable community? And that forms part of the CGE's mandate in ensuring the achievement of gender equality in South Africa. So LGBTI rights are not just some special thing that LGBTI people have, but it is about that group of people who cannot access the rights that already exist. So LGBTI rights are human rights, like everybody is entitled to, but because LGBTI people and the LGBTI community is a minority community, they deserve special attention in order to locate the places where they are discriminated against and cannot access the rest of the human rights as in our Bill of Rights.
So then how are LGBTI rights linked to gender equality?
Well, in South Africa, or in the South African Constitution, we have Section 9, which is the Equality Clause. A lot of people just call it the Equality Clause. But the Equality Clause says that everyone has the right to not be discriminated against on the basis of a number of grounds. So that includes race, which everyone understands. You cannot discriminate on the basis of race. That includes sex. So you cannot discriminate on the basis of one person is a woman and another person is a man. And then there is the ground of gender and gender expression. And that is an umbrella term, or a term that encompasses everything. The Constitutional Court has also developed the jurisprudence to include people who are transgender, people who are intersex, and lesbian and gay people, right? And so that is what the CGE is interested in. How is the Equality Clause applied to the LGBTI community? Are LGBTI people being discriminated against? And if so, on what basis and in what areas? Are they being discriminated against in the area of education? How is that happening? Are they being discriminated against in the area of shelter and access to shelter? How is that happening? Are they being discriminated against in the area of access to health? How is that happening? Can a lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex person or queer person access the rights that are contained in the Bill of Rights? So it's not just the right to equality, but also how can the right to equality be realized in relation to all of the other rights in the Bill of Rights.
And in what ways does the CGE work seek to address the LGBTI rights?
So, because, as I said in the first part of our conversation, that LGBTI rights are human rights, right? So the CGE, in its work in every aspect, whether we are investigating the right to reproductive health or access to the right to reproductive health, whether we are investigating access to shelters, we have a shelters report, whether we are investigating access to education, we ensure that LGBTI rights and LGBTI issues are filtered into the work that we do. So it's part and parcel. So in our shelters report, for instance, you will find parts of the report that note the lack of shelter, access to shelter for LGBTI people. Because what we want to do as the CGE is we want to remove the idea that LGBTI rights are something special that belongs in its own special corner, but exists in every aspect of our research and in us as the CGE carrying out our mandate, right? So if we're talking about elections, how are LGBTI people accessing elections? How are they voting? What are their voting patterns? What are the systems in place to ensure that they are protected and not intimidated as part and parcel of our election observations, for instance? So that's a conversation we want to have as the CGE to ensure that every aspect of our research, of our legal reform, of our lobbying, of our entire mandate filters the idea of LGBTI equality as part and parcel of the achievement of gender equality.
So you made mention of one of the reports that has been done, which is the shelter report, and I'm aware that at the moment we are running a call for contribution. So in practical terms, what are the contributions of these reports in terms of changing legislation or the legal framework, like you have mentioned, in ensuring that these rights are achieved in society?
Well, I mean, there's a number of ways the CGE does this, right? We have our complaints process where individuals can complain if they experience some form of gender discrimination. Let's say you are a lesbian who wears a suit at work and they say that women cannot wear suits at work. That is a form of discrimination, right? And it is your right to complain and to utilize the various pieces of legislation and court systems to access the right to not be discriminated against at work. But we know that access to courts is very expensive. So what the CGE does, or part of the function of the CGE, is it takes on those cases that are of a public interest. We don't take all individual cases. We take those cases that are of a public interest and that relate to our mandate as the CGE. And we take them and we push them through the court process. Our primary point of redress is the equality courts, for instance, right? Another way is commissioner-led projects and policies and policy creating dialogues. And part of this, our commissioner-led project, each commissioner should have an issue that they bring to the table and they try to create dialogue and conversation around that. Mine is LGBTI equality, and as such, there is currently a process of a call for submissions, and all submissions will feed into the commissioner written up report, and that report will contain what we call recommendations. Now, recommendations are incredibly powerful yet small things, right? So recommendations are binding, right? If we recommend, for instance, that the Minister of Health institute a legislative reform in a particular area, we as the CGE can follow up on that because that's part of our mandate. We had a recommendation in the shelters report, then we follow up in the various with the various public officials and state organs to say, we have a shelter report, for instance, and we recommended that you do A, B, C, D. How far along are you in doing that A, B, C, D? And we can hold public institutions and public officials to these recommendations. And that is a very important, small but powerful tool that the CGE has.
So going back to what you mentioned regarding commissioners and having programs that they lead, and you speak so passionately about the LGBTI community, what informed this program? What were the gaps that you saw in society that informed that this program is important and is needed in the CGE?
As I said, thank you very much for that question, Vikateko. I get to be more passionate. As I said, whilst the CGE's mandate is concerned with ensuring and monitoring gender equality in our society, we haven't had, focused, evidence gathering processes, right? And as much as we want to ensure that every project we have, whether it's a shelters report, reproductive health report, correctional services report, incorporates LGBTI rights and LGBTI issues, we have to also continuously monitor and keep our finger on the pulse, as it were, in order to identify the areas of concern that the community is currently tackling. So the Commissioner-led report is part of testing and sort of putting our fingers on the pulse and understanding what are the contemporary concerns of the LGBTI community. Issues that have, come through this process include issues of intersex genital mutilation, right? Where young children are being mutilated from birth, right? And that's a deep concern. We don't have legislation, we don't have policy that brings accountability against health officials that perform these medically unnecessary procedures, surgical procedures. We have the issue of identity documents for transgender persons, for instance. As you know, although South Africa allows you to transition your gender through the ID process, that process is slow. That process is misunderstood by Home Affairs officials. There's been reports where transgender people go to have their gender markers changed, and the Home Affairs official says that doesn't exist, right? Another issue that's coming up is access to health for transgender people, right? Currently, there are very few hospitals that have a dedicated transitioning unit. These include the Steve Biko Hospital in Gauteng. This also includes Groote Schuur Hospital in Cape Town. The list for surgeries in Groote Schuur alone is 25 years long. So that means if I want to transition as a trans person and I go to Groote Schuur, that means I'll get my first surgery 25 years down the line. That is something that we need to address as South Africa. And I think that a lot of South Africans would realize that if you needed a kidney transplant today, or maybe in the next couple of months, and then in the way you go to a hospital and they say, well, the next available theater is 25 years down the line, regardless of whether you get a kidney or not, we would find that that is fundamentally wrong. Yeah. So when it comes to trans people, the same applies. It's fundamentally wrong to deny people access to effective health care. And that's part of what we should be addressing as the CGE, because it's part and parcel of realizing the right to a gender equality. It's also part and parcel of, when we talk about reproductive health for women, it's in the same vein. Access to abortion, access to contraceptives. If we said to women, in order for you to access, an abortion or to access contraceptives, you have to wait 25 years, we would find that wrong. We would say that's unacceptable. So yet it has become the norm in our hospitals for trans people to either be turned away or to be told the list is so long as to, be a denial of access to health.
So I think I just wanted to understand there is still a lot of stereotypes, surrounding the LGBTI persons or the community. What do you think can be done now, other than the commission? What can people, us ourselves, on the ground, what do you think we can do to help the situation and to protect the people of the LGBTI community?
That's really great. I think that information, as the CGE, we have also education programs. It's part of our function is to educate the communities. But obviously, because of budgetary or human resource limitations, we don't have the ability to reach everyone or even every community. So we have prioritizations. Each year we prioritize particular rights or particular issues. And I think what is important for South Africans is, you know, you have knowledge in your hand. A lot of us have access to Google in urban areas and can search what are LGBTI rights, right? A simple phrase like just put in LGBTI space rights and just read through it, right? And also, excuse me, have the ability to be curious, right? And I know a lot of people feel, you know, when I ask questions, then people are hostile. But it's also in the way you ask questions. You know, you can't ask people, the Bible says homosexuality is a sin. What do you have to say about that, right? Maybe ask a person that you know, if you don't, you know, designate people as LGBTI, but if a person is out, say, how can I respect you as a human being? What are the things that are important to you when I'm interacting with you that can allow you to be free and feel protected? And oftentimes, this is how we create community. And this is how we acknowledge that, you know, everyone in our community needs to be protected, right? And so I think those are the small ways. Information, knowledge, and finding it are very important, and being open to that knowledge and also how you phrase that knowledge.
Thank you very much. That was Commissioner Deyi.